I had been sitting in the emergency room for 6 hours. My daughter was burning up with a 104-degree fever, and my ex-husband, who had full insurance coverage, had ignored all 12 of my calls. The triage nurse looked at me with tired, kind eyes and said, "Honey, there's a man in Base 7 who's been waiting alone all night after saving a kid from a car wreck. Nobody's come for him either. Maybe you two should start a support group for people the world forgot." I glanced through the curtain and saw him bruised, bloodied, still wearing a security guard uniform, and something in his hollow, exhausted eyes mirrored exactly what I felt. He looked back at me. Neither of us smiled, but neither of us looked away. My name is Simone. I was 34, a night shift nurse at a nursing home in Newark, and the single mother of a 5-year-old daughter named Zoe. 6 months earlier, my ex-husband, Terrence, had walked out on us for a woman he met at his law firm. He left behind a mortgage I couldn't afford, a car note in both our names that he stopped paying, and a little girl who still asked every night when Daddy was coming home. I had no answer for her. I barely had answers for myself. That night in the ER, Zoe had spiked a fever so high she started having chills. I wrapped her in a blanket and drove 20 minutes to the closest hospital that would see us without a fight over the copay. Terrence had taken her off his insurance plan without telling me. I found out when the pharmacy rejected her prescription 2 weeks prior. Since then, I had been paying out of pocket for everything, which meant choosing between Zoe's antibiotics and our electric bill. The electric company won that month because it was February and I couldn't let my child freeze. While the nurse processed Zoe's intake, I stepped into the hallway to try Terrence one more time, straight to voicemail. I pressed my back against the wall and closed my eyes, too exhausted to cry. That's when I heard the voice from Base 7. "You can stop pretending to be asleep. I saw you looking." I opened my eyes. The curtain was partially drawn, and the man was sitting up on the gurney, his left arm in a temporary splint, a gauze pad taped across his forehead. Despite the injuries, his posture was straight, almost military. His voice was deep, calm, the kind of calm that comes from having survived worse. "I wasn't pretending," I said. "I was praying." "For your little girl?" I nodded. "She'll be fine. Kids are tougher than we think." He paused. "I'm Damon." I'd shake your hand, but he lifted the splinted arm and almost smiled. "Simone?" I said. "What happened to you?" He told me. He'd been working his overnight security shift at a warehouse in East Orange when he heard tires screaming and a child scream. A car had jumped the curb and hit a 10-year-old boy riding his bike home from a corner store at 9 o'clock at night. Damon didn't think. He ran out, pulled the boy from under the front wheel, and shielded him with his body when the driver reversed and fled. The boy survived with a broken leg. Damon took the worst end of it: fractured wrist, 3 cracked ribs, a gash above his eyebrow that needed 14 stitches. "Anyone coming for you?" I asked. He looked at the empty chair beside his bed. "No, not anymore." That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, something strange and quiet happened. Damon and I kept finding reasons to cross paths. He started coming by the nursing home at the end of my shift to walk me to my car because the parking lot had no lights and the neighborhood had gotten worse. I brought him soup when I found out he was eating ramen noodles 3 meals a day because his disability check from the VA barely covered rent. He was a veteran, 2 tours in Afghanistan, a Purple Heart he kept in a shoebox under his bed, and a level of post-traumatic stress he never talked about, but I could see in the way he checked every exit in a room before he sat down. He never pushed, he never flirted, he just showed up, and after a year of being abandoned, I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone simply show up. One evening, Zoe had a nightmare. She was screaming for her daddy, and nothing I did could calm her down. I was sitting on the kitchen floor at midnight, crying, holding my sobbing child, when my phone buzzed. It was Damon. Just a text. "Couldn't sleep. You okay?" I didn't know why, but I called him. He answered on the first ring. I didn't even speak, he heard Zoe crying and said, "Put me on speaker." Then he started talking to her, gentle and low, telling her a story about a brave princess who had a magic shield that kept away all the monsters. Within 5 minutes, Zoe was asleep on my lap, phone still pressed to her ear, little fingers curled around it. I sat there in the dark kitchen, listening to Damon breathe on the other end of the line, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not love, not yet. Just the terrifying realization that I needed this man, and needing anyone scared me more than being alone. 3 months later, I came home from a double shift to find an eviction notice taped to my front door. Terrence had not only stopped paying the mortgage, he had refinanced the house in secret before the divorce was finalized, pulling out $80,000 in equity and leaving me with a loan balance I never agreed to. The bank didn't care. My name was on the original deed. I had 30 days to pay $14,000 in arrears or get out. I sat on the porch steps, staring at the paper. Zoe was at my mother's house. The street was empty. I called Damon. He arrived in 20 minutes. He read the notice, his jaw tightening with every line. Then he looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "Move in with me." I stared at him. "Damon, we're not even—" "I know what we're not. I also know what we are. We're two people who don't have anyone else. My apartment has 2 bedrooms. Zoe can have the second one. You save on rent, catch up on bills, and figure out the legal situation without being homeless. No strings." I wanted to say no. Every instinct told me not to depend on a man again. But Zoe's face flashed before my eyes. Zoe asking why we had to keep the heat so low. Zoe wearing shoes that were a size too small because I couldn't afford new ones. Zoe deserving better than what I could give her alone. I said yes. The apartment was small, on the 4th floor of a building in Irvington with a radiator that clanked all night and a super named Mr. Ortiz who knew everyone's business. But it was warm, and it was safe. Damon gave Zoe his bedroom and converted the living room into his sleeping area. He installed a lock on Zoe's door so she'd feel secure. He bought her a nightlight shaped like a turtle because she told him once she liked turtles. He never said it was a big deal. He just did it. What I didn't know was that Damon was carrying his own storm. His ex-wife, Vanessa, had left him while he was deployed in Kandahar. She cleaned out their joint account, filed for divorce, and moved in with a real estate developer named Curtis Palmer. When Damon came home to an empty apartment with a Dear John letter on the kitchen table, he spiraled. The PTSD, the betrayal, the isolation. He lost his business, a small IT consulting firm he'd built from scratch before his deployment. Curtis, through a shell company, had acquired Damon's defaulted business loans and used them to seize his client contracts. Damon came home from war to find that the man sleeping with his wife had also stolen his livelihood. He told me all this one night, sitting on the fire escape, staring at nothing. His voice didn't shake. He had made peace with it the way soldiers make peace with shrapnel left inside their bodies, not removed, just endured. "Why didn't you fight it?" I asked. "Because I was too busy trying not to put a bullet in my own head," he said quietly. "By the time I wanted to live again, the statute of limitations had run out on most of it." I reached for his hand. His fingers were rough, scarred. He flinched at first, then held on. Everything changed on a Tuesday. Terrence showed up at my mother's house while she was watching Zoe. He was drunk, loud, and demanding to see his daughter. When my mother refused, he shoved past her and grabbed Zoe's arm so hard he left bruises. My mother called 911, but by the time the police arrived, Terrence had left. When I saw the purple fingerprints on my baby's arm, something inside me went cold and still, the way water goes still before it becomes ice. I took photographs. I drove to the police station and filed a report. I went to the courthouse the next morning and filed for a restraining order. The judge denied it. Terrence's lawyer, paid for by his new girlfriend's family, argued that it was a misunderstanding between a concerned father and an uncooperative grandmother. He presented Terrence as a devoted parent being kept from his child by a bitter ex-wife. He painted me as unstable living with a man I wasn't married to, who had a history of mental health issues and a failed business. I left the courthouse shaking. Damon was waiting outside. He saw my face and didn't ask what happened. He just opened the car door for me and drove us home in silence. That night, after Zoe was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall. Damon sat across from me. "He's going to get custody," I whispered. "His lawyer is better than anything I can afford. He's going to take my baby." Damon was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What if he couldn't argue that Zoe's home environment is unstable?" "What do you mean?" "Marry me." The kitchen clock ticked. The radiator clanked. I looked at him. If we're married, he continued, his voice steady, the court sees a two-parent household, a veteran with a clean record and a stable job. It takes away Terrence's entire argument. And he paused, choosing his words carefully. I know this isn't how it's supposed to be. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering you a shield for Zoe, the same way you offered me a reason to keep going when I had none. I looked at his face, the scar above his eyebrow from the night he saved a stranger's child, the lines around his eyes from years of sleepless nights, the quiet, unshakable decency of a man who had every reason to be bitter and chose not to be. Okay, I said. Yes. We got married at City Hall on a Thursday afternoon. Mr. Ortiz was our witness. Zoe wore her favorite yellow dress and held a bouquet of dandelions she had picked from the vacant lot next door. There was no music, no cake, no photographer, just a clerk, a stamp, and a piece of paper that said this man was now my husband. That night, Damon slept on the couch. I lay in bed listening to Zoe breathe in the next room and wondered what I had done, but the fear was smaller than the relief. For the first time in a year, I felt like I had a fighting chance. The custody battle was ugly. Terrence's lawyer, a slick man named Winston Clark, attacked everything: my finances, my work schedule, Damon's PTSD diagnosis. He subpoenaed Damon's VA medical records and read them aloud in open court, describing his nightmares, his anxiety episodes, his brief hospitalization after a panic attack. He made Damon sound dangerous. I watched my husband sit in that witness chair, his jaw tight, his hands gripping his knees, as a stranger turned his worst moments into weapons. He didn't flinch. He answered every question with the same quiet composure he brought to everything. When Clark asked, "Isn't it true that you are mentally unstable and potentially a danger to a child?" Damon looked at him and said, "I carried a rifle for this country for 8 years, so men like you could ask questions like that in safety. I have never harmed a child. I saved one. I have the hospital report to prove it." The courtroom went silent. But the real turning point came from an unexpected place. One of Terrence's paralegals, a young woman named Keely, contacted me through a burner email. She wrote that she couldn't stay silent anymore. She attached documents showing that Terrence had billed clients for work he never performed, had forged my signature on the refinancing documents, and most critically, had a second family, a woman in Philadelphia, a toddler son. He had been living a double life for 2 years before he left me. I turned everything over to my lawyer, a scrappy legal aid attorney named Mrs. Delgado, who worked out of a storefront office and fought like she had a personal grudge against injustice. She presented the forged refinancing documents and the proof of Terrence's fraud to the judge. She called my mother, who testified about the bruises on Zoe's arm. She called Mr. Ortiz, who described how Damon walked Zoe to school every morning and helped her with homework every evening. She called the boy Damon had saved from the car wreck, now 11 years old, walking with a slight limp, who told the judge, "That man is a hero. If he hadn't come, I would be dead." The judge awarded me full custody. Terrence was ordered to pay back child support and was referred to the district attorney's office for the forging of the refinancing documents. His legal career was finished. Outside the courthouse, Zoe ran to Damon and leaped into his arms. "We won, Daddy D, we won!" It was the first time she had called him that. Damon buried his face in her hair and his shoulders shook. I put my arms around both of them and let myself cry. We stood there on the courthouse steps, 3 people the world had tried to throw away, holding on to each other. But peace never lasted long in our lives. A month after the custody ruling, Damon came home white-faced. His former business partner, a man named Roland, had resurfaced. Roland had been working with Curtis Palmer Vanessa's new husband for years. Together, they had been using Damon's old company as a shell to launder money through government IT contracts. When federal investigators started closing in, they needed a fall guy. They pointed the finger at Damon, the original owner of record. 2 FBI agents showed up at our apartment at 6 in the morning. Zoe was eating cereal. They put Damon in handcuffs in front of her. She screamed. I screamed. Damon just looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "Take care of her. I'll fix this." The door closed. The cereal got soggy. Zoe wouldn't stop shaking. I wanted to fall apart, but my daughter needed me upright. I called Mrs. Delgado. I called the VA. I called every person who owed me a favor and some who didn't. I worked double shifts and sold my mother's pearl earrings, the only thing of value I owned, to cover the retainer for a federal defense attorney. When I visited Damon in detention, he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He told me to take Zoe and leave. Start over. Forget him. I put my hand on the glass between us. You married me to give my daughter a shield. Now I'm going to be yours. Don't you dare give up on us. The investigation took 3 months. During that time, I barely slept. Mrs. Delgado connected us with a forensic accountant who traced every dollar through Roland and Curtis's network. The money never touched Damon's personal accounts. The contracts were signed after his deployment. He was literally in another country when the fraud was committed. The digital signatures were forged using the same method Terrence had used on my refinancing documents, which opened an entirely new thread of conspiracy between Terrence, Curtis, and Roland. They had all been connected lawyers, real estate developers, and con men feeding off the people closest to them. The federal judge dismissed all charges against Damon. Roland was arrested the same afternoon. Curtis Palmer fled to the Dominican Republic but was caught at the airport in Miami 3 weeks later. And Vanessa, Damon's ex-wife, was charged as an accessory for her role in transferring Damon's company assets to Curtis's Shell Corporation. The day Damon walked out of the federal building, free and cleared, it was raining. I was standing on the steps with an umbrella. Zoe was at school. I wanted to give him a moment without her seeing how broken down he was. He walked toward me slowly, and when he reached me, he didn't say anything. He just stood in the rain and let it wash over his face. Then he stepped under the umbrella, pulled me close, and whispered, "Thank you for not letting go." We went home. Zoe came back from school, saw Damon on the couch, and ran so fast she tripped over the rug. He caught her. She grabbed his face with both hands and said, "Daddy D, I made you a picture of our family. You're in it. You're always in it." It was a crayon drawing 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. The tall one in the middle was wearing a green uniform. Damon hung it on the refrigerator. It's still there. The years that followed were quiet in the best possible way. Damon used his IT skills to start a small cybersecurity consultancy, working from our apartment at first, then renting a small office when the contracts grew. I went back to school for my RN degree and got a position at a hospital with real benefits, including insurance for Zoe. We moved to a bigger apartment in Maplewood with a backyard just big enough for Zoe's dream, a garden. Mr. Ortiz cried when we told him we were moving. "You were the best tenants I ever had," he said, then slipped Zoe a $20 bill for plant seeds. On Zoe's 8th birthday, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified. The memory of struggle, of choosing between medicine and electricity, of eviction notices and courtrooms, it all came flooding back. Damon found me sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at the test, shaking. He sat down next to me, right there on the tile. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. "That we'll lose everything again." He took the test from my hand and looked at it. A slow, wide smile broke across his face, the first truly unreserved smile I had ever seen from him. "Simone, we built this life from nothing. Twice. We survived worse than a baby." He kissed my forehead. "This isn't a storm. This is the rainbow." Our son, Elijah, was born on a clear September morning. Zoe held him in the hospital room, gentle as glass, and announced to everyone who walked in, "This is my brother. I'm going to teach him everything." Damon held the baby against his chest, and I watched a tear roll down his scarred face. This man who had been to war, who had been robbed, abandoned, jailed, and stripped of everything, this man was crying because his son had 10 perfect fingers. Last month, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Keely, the paralegal who had risked her career to expose Terrence. She wrote to tell me that Terrence had been disbarred and was doing community service for the forgery conviction. His Philadelphia girlfriend had left him. He was living with his mother. I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel sad either. I just felt free. That same weekend, we had a barbecue in our small backyard. Mrs. Delgado came with her grandchildren. Mr. Ortiz drove 40 minutes to bring his famous flan. Zoe chased Elijah around the yard while Damon manned the grill, wearing an apron that said "World's Okayest Chef Zoe's Christmas gift to him." I sat in a lawn chair, watching my family, and thought about that night in the emergency room. 6 hours of waiting, 12 unanswered calls, a triage nurse making a joke about 2 forgotten people starting a support group. She had no idea how right she was. If someone had told me that the worst night of my life would lead me to the best man I've ever known, I would have laughed. If they had told me that a marriage of convenience would become the most real thing I've ever experienced, I would have called them crazy. But life doesn't follow the scripts we write for it. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one you planned for. Sometimes love doesn't start with fireworks. It starts with someone showing up at midnight, telling your daughter a story about a brave princess, and staying on the line until she falls asleep. That's the whole story. It doesn't have a dramatic ending because it's not over. We're still here, Damon and Simone and Zoe and Elijah, in a house with a small garden and a crayon drawing on the refrigerator. The storms taught us to build better, love harder, and never take a single quiet evening for granted. If you liked my story and want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support me, you can do it through Super Thanks. It means a lot. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is so I can see how far my story reaches. I've added 2 more life stories on the screen just for you. Click one now and let's keep spending time together. Much love.